Hello and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. Well, before we start, I hope you're all doing well and you are enjoying our conversation where we talk about pain. For those of you who don't know our show, this is a conversation where we talk to individuals who've been through pain and we deal with all sorts of pain. Today's guest, we'll be talking to Onyango Otieno. Onyango Otieno is a writer, trauma healer, facilitator, poet, mental health advocate, digital trainer, and a healthy masculine ambassador. His work centers on African masculinity and its role in ensuring gender equality, especially championing for African men involvement in sexuality and reproductive health and rights. He is a facilitator of trauma healing crisis, managing a safe space for African boys and men who've been raped or sexually abused. He founded a 200 member men health online support group where members utilize storytelling as a tool for tracking mental health illness stigma. And he also hosts an African masculinity podcast where he integrates the complexity of African masculine. I reached out to him to talk to him about his own issues that had to overcome, his own pains he had to deal with as a child growing up, from trauma from his own household to his carer who was physically abused him. Most importantly, I want to talk about being in lockdown. Talk to him about the lockdown process with men who are so afraid to talk. Issues ranging from being abused verbally and sexually. And why are men still afraid to talk about this critical matter? Meet Onyango. Well, hello everyone again. Welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. As we've said in the introduction, I have Onyango here with me. Where are you based, Onyango?
I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh wow, wonderful place. I have been there. I love Nairobi.
Oh,
Mombasa and Nairobi are the two places I stopped. I haven't gone any further to other places, but those places are massive and really beautiful. And I really encourage anyone who really is inspired with the safari, outdoor living, lovely weather as well to visit Nairobi. How are you today? How are you doing apart from that?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a really beautiful day. The sun is out there. I'm sorry, you guys. I understand you probably are going through winter right now. It's a little cold. Um,
It is, it's so funny you said that. It is cold, but it is, and the sun is shining. And the sky is blue. It's not the dull and grey weather we normally get in England. It is so beautiful today. So I'm actually happy. I reached out to you because of your story. I was so blown away when I read your page on Instagram and everything you do for people, especially men. I think we live in a culture where men don't really talk, and you are very vocal about your opinion about everything going on with men issues, which is mostly to do with sexuality and sexual abuse. And I was so fascinated. I'm so glad you opened up yourself and started talking about it, because especially during lockdown where we are right now, there's so many people always assume automatically it's always the women who have these issues, not realizing that actually men do go through these issues, just that most men don't talk about it. Before we go deep into it, could you just tell us a little bit about your background and who you are?
well, I'll try a little bit. uh, yeah. My name is Onyango Otieno. I am a writer. I'm a poet. I am a mental health advocate. I am a digital advocacy trainer as well, and a trauma healing facilitator. I run a podcast called Afro Masculinity Podcast, in which I interrogate the complexities of African masculinities. Um, in a nutshell, I grew up in an extensively abusive home where my father was extremely violent towards myself and my mom. And it's violence that was physical, it was emotional, it was psychological, really hard to deal with. And I didn't know how that was going to affect me in my later life. You think after you're done with the physicality of the violence, then you're going to be okay. And then the other implications start manifesting later in your life. And I was just like, it was crazy because later on, I struggled with depression, I struggled with the post-traumatic stress, I struggled with anxiety. And it was until recently that I actually understood these terms because nobody had ever told me how to take care of my mind. So I am very vocal about these issues as a man who has been through a lot of these difficulties in his life. And then when I was 20 years old, I was actually raped by our housekeeper. And I didn't know it was violation until 10 years later when I was going through therapy that it clicked that, oh, something must have happened back there. And it explained a lot of some of the things I had been struggling with. And coming out with the story wasn't the most difficult thing for me because I had already been talking about gender-based violence and domestic violence that I had been going through when I was a child. So this was an added piece already because I had been talking about mental health as well here. But the outcome was also just, it baffled me because in as much as I had very harsh comments, most of them coming from men, regarding, me coming out saying this happens to me. There were so many other men who reached out to me in my inbox saying, what, I also went through this thing, and you're the first man I've ever seen talking about this thing in public. So that also sort of just changed my life.
No, absolutely. I think it's such a difficult emotional subject for men to talk about this. I think because society have put the stigma on men that men should be this. So for a man to come out and talk about it, it's always like people always look down, but not knowing. Now I have a son, I realize that this is not what men should be. Men should be human beings. There shouldn't be any segregation. We're all human beings, and everyone should be loved the same way, and everyone should be free to express and talk about things, no matter what anyone has to say about it. If you're going through a bruise, you should be free to talk about it. You just said that it was mostly men that were really very vocal about you talking about these issues. Why do you think men are that way?
Well, there's a lot that goes into that. The first one is because of how deeply patriarchal the world is. When it comes to sexual violence, men are often viewed as perpetrators. So it's a very difficult concept for somebody who's been idealized as a perpetrator to come out as a victim or a survivor. That's very hard to deal with because it's not in your everyday story, right? Every day I wake up in the news, in my community, on CNN, everywhere, a man did something wrong. It's a man who, did some. I mean, we all watched what was happening yesterday in the U.S. In the Capitol. A majority of the guys who you were seeing being violent were men. And the police, again, majority of them you are seeing holding guns are men. And so violence is almost been made synonymous to masculinity. So when you come out as a man saying this happened to you, it doesn't register that quickly in society. It doesn't register. So the first instinct is to fight that story, right? Because it's out of your normality, right? And the second one is just the socialization around who men ought to be, because we are taught from a very young age to harden up and to suck up our emotions and to be strong in the eyes of everybody else, because we're supposed to be manning resources, we're supposed to order women around, we're supposed to be politicians, we're supposed to be priests of our homes, we're supposed to be at the head of our homes, all those things. So we are groomed from a very young age to seem to be strong and actually dehumanize our internal realities. And as such, when you come out as somebody who is considered weak in the eyes of men, they want to bash that thing out. And yet they actually relate to a lot of your pain, but they just, they want to deny that, right?
Yeah. No, I think you're really spot on in that. In African society, it seems a little bit more different because I know the culture has a thing where we haven't started opening up about men, and it's really that's like I think what you said is very, very true. But in your instance, even though you're based in Africa, you weren't scared. You just said, you know what? I'm not afraid of the stigma. I'm not afraid of what people are going to say. I'm going to go out there and help them. I'm going to help people who are going through this problem. Why did you do that? That is such a lovely thing to do.
Well, because when I was 16 years old, I was suicidal. And life was really, I felt really defeated by life. I remember actually feeling like I had let go of my spirit and I was running away from home. I wanted to go die somewhere nobody knew me. Um, but prior to that, it was about the same time when I had begun writing poetry as a way of self expression and coping with the pain I was dealing with. But I remember being like feeling so pushed to the wall that I felt if I didn't say something, I was gonna die. I had so much that had accumulated inside me, so much pain. I was like, yo, if I don't find a way to get this thing out, it's gonna kill me. So for me, my beginning to write started as a protest. Okay. And that is the time this courage was born. It was a protest. It began as a protest. And because of the crazy backlash I received, even from my father in the beginning, I think I just grew some kind of thick skin from that time. And I also started being aware of the world around me because in Kenya at the time, our politics is still very much divisive, and understanding social justice and activism, those things were very, lucrative to me from a very young age. And so I understood injustice because it was happening in my home. And I think what I woke up to was the reality that this thing wasn't just happening in my home, it was happening in my neighborhood. It was happening to women in my village. It was happening to poor men in my country. From as early as 17 years old, I got that. And I said, because I identify with that injustice of my voice being stifled, of somebody telling me you have to keep quiet because I have power over you, who was my dad. So I just equated my dad to oppressive governments, oppressive regimes, to everybody who was out there trying to shut people down, people who wanted equality. And that was very easy for me to understand because the oppressive systems, they work the same everywhere on this planet, right? So I was like, from a very young age, I started speaking. When I went back to school, I spoke against oppressive ideas in school administrations. It landed me in trouble, but I kept going. And when I got to university before dropping out, I did the same thing. And for me, I said, if my life is gonna count, the little time I have here, I want to spend it speaking for those who are oppressed. I want to spend my time doing that.
Yeah.
There are so many things human beings can do on this earth, but I chose that path for myself.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, I went back because I think what baffled me most was, I mean, on top of doing like, I was already doing poetry, I was already an activist before, but talking about sexual violence that happens to men and the many men who reached out to me saying this thing happened to them, but they don't know what to do, that just sparked a fire. I was like, okay, on top of the many things I've already been doing, I'm going to add this, and just see what happens. And
That-
here we are.
That's amazing. You talk about men reaching out to you to talk about these issues. So when a typical guy, man or family man, husband, whatever, reaches out to you and says, "This is what I'm going to, Onyango, give me an advice. What do I do? I've just been victimized in one way or the other." what advice would you give? It's like, for example, we're in lockdown in the UK, and so many people, so many men, for example, are going through various abuse. And you talk about it's not just sexual abuse; there could be emotional abuse, all kinds of abuse, in fact.
Mm.
And what advice would you give someone who is going through a tough time right now?
That's usually the hardest question because everybody's situation is very unique, you know. But the first thing is always about emotional regulation. That means like holding space for this person, making them feel heard, that validating their experience, because at that moment they feel so alone and so misunderstood, very unseen. So to help them regulate their emotions, you hold space for them, and that's I've been trained to do that, in my professional practice. And so I also operate a safe space for these men where like it's an online space, but I've also been having physical meetings that I started last year, actually just at the onset of COVID, because sexual violence just went above the roof. And a lot of these stories are coming out. But so yeah, so after just talking to them, making them feel heard, making them feel validated, depending on the situation, because some people can get out of that space, some people cannot get out of that space immediately. We just talk through, are you in a position to get some kind of psychosocial help? And if not, what's the best way you can get assistance? But for me, the first step of liberation is speaking up.
That is very true. Yeah, because I think once you speak out, that is the sign that you're really ready to let go of your current
Yeah.
situation. You're ready to let people know that you're going through a hard time. You know, join us. You've been doing this Instagram page, and how is it going? And how are people taking to you right now?
Oh man, the last week has been intense. We did, my story appeared on the BBC, and I mean, that just flew across the globe.
Mm.
I've been talking to everybody, man. Like the other day, BBC showed the story in Brazil, and you can be assured I've been speaking a lot of Portuguese the past couple of days. That so many people are reaching out with messages of support. I have all these therapists who are saying, I want to help out with those guys, just, volunteer my time. So many others are saying, this also happened to me when I was young, but my society here cannot allow me. I do not understand how you have all this courage, and some of them are also supporting my work, because one of the things I realized was I needed to be somewhat self-sustainable with this work, running the safe space, because I offer these guys like coping tools to help them just know how to be with themselves, reintegrate themselves to society, reconnect with their bodies, which is a lot of emotional work. Um, and we have very few men who are versed with this situation. So I started doing a fundraising project last year, and when I began it, I realized that, understandably, because women and girls have been the one historically who've been exposed to sexual violence. A lot of funding goes to feminist movements who work in this area. So it's actually almost very new in the donor world that somebody could be looking for funding to help out men who've been sexually abused. It's very new, so it's not been easy to look for funds for that. So I've just been like crowdsourcing. I've been crowdfunding in Kenya, and I also have an international page where people can donate their money and stuff like that. So many people have been reaching out to me asking, how can we support this? Because we can't be in Kenya with you. So how else do we support this? So I just send them the link, and they send however much they can. And so that has been helpful, because one of the bigger visions I have is I want to actually create rescue centers across Africa for men who are going through this. As we speak right now, we only have shelters and rescue centers for women and girls in Kenya. So for men and boys who are going through, sexual abuse, there's almost nowhere to go for them. So I want to create actual physical spaces where these guys would actually come and, have this peace of mind, and we take them through programs of therapy that are going to help them psychologically and emotionally and even physically, just so that we keep making noise about this thing because it's killing a lot of us.
That's true. No, no, I'm
Yeah.
absolutely. That's very true. So I'm really glad this is what you do, and I'm glad that you're vocal and you're willing to help people. And a final question: how do you find joy after everything you've been through? How did you find your own joy?
How did I find my own joy?
Yes, after everything you went through, how did you say, you know what, I'm going to let go of everything going on, and I'm just going to be happy and still, you still have that scar, but you're still finding ways to live.
Oh man, that has been a lot of emotional labor. And that has been a lot of emotional labor. But I want to say I didn't find it on my own. Life has been kind to me to give me great friends. I'm a very communal person. I don't do everything alone. Um, I've been incredibly blessed to have like a very closely knit group of friends, like male friends who I met when I was 22 years old, like 10 years ago now. And we all had issues with our fathers. And when we met, we didn't even know how to start talking. And in the beginning, it started like a Bible study because we all had Christian backgrounds. But the more we stuck together, the stories just started coming out and we felt safe. And it was the first time we all had a safe space as men. I had never imagined such a thing would exist for me, and by then we didn't even have WhatsApp wasn't even there yet. So we had like this closed Facebook group where people would just pour out their emotions at 3 a.m. in the morning, and somebody wakes up and makes you feel like, yeah, they heard you, and the next time they'll see you, they'll listen to you further. And I built up from that from a very young age, and they helped me survive through so many things because at 22, 23, I was still living with my parents and they were still physically fighting. It was just too much for me. So I have found joy in people who love me, people who believe in my light, people who hold my hand, they pat on me on my shoulder and they tell me, keep going, we believe in you, we see your light. And that is what has made me believe in myself, the fact that there are so many others who see the struggle I've gone through, and they see that I have a heart that wants to give and give and give. And so sort of the universe sort of looked for people. And some of them sometimes are strangers, and they send me warm messages, they call me, they want to talk to me, they encourage me. So that joy is communal. I didn't get it out on my own. And I think the fact that I've met people who really purely have wanted good things for me um, restores a lot of faith in humanity on my end.
Onyango, I'm so honored to talk to you today, and thank you for shining an important light on a critical issue affecting so many men who are unwilling or too scared to talk about that. Thank you, and please keep doing your great work. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
All right.